It is exactly 9 o'clock right here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Good evening on this eve of Jamhuri Day, Kenya at 60, coming up in just about 3 hours. And right here on TV47, the home of untold stories, we have indeed a lot to inform you, including some feature stories on the journey to the road, or rather the road to Kenya at 60. We thank you so much for choosing TV47 to inform you on our social media platforms. We ask you, what do you have to celebrate with Kenya at 60? Engage us on our social media platforms at TV47 News, at George Maringa _ use the hashtag Daily Report. On our SMS line, start with your name, where you're watching us from, and your feedback on the same. My name is George Maringa. Rhoda Nyamai is our sign language interpreter tonight, and as you can see, we're both in maroon. We'll tell you why. Here now are our top stories tonight. Tonight, Energy CS Davis Chirchir states that the nationwide power outage on Sunday evening was caused by a malfunction in the power transmission lines in the Kisumu-Muhoroni area.
We know where the problem is, and we are addressing those challenges. It's bound to happen again.
This as consumers threaten legal action. The National Transport and Safety Authority, NTSA, is proposing a reconsideration of its service fees to address a budget shortfall exceeding 2.37 billion shillings. Plus, as Kenya celebrates 60 years since gaining independence, we focus on the steps the government has taken to combat poverty.
There is a lot of disappointment. Not that the country is poor, but that it has had poor leadership.
On social media as well as on our SMS platform, we ask you, what do you have to celebrate with Kenya turning 60 tomorrow? At George Maringa _ at TV47 News 22047 is our SMS line. Begin with your name, where you're watching us from, and your feedback as well. We begin tonight with news just in, where a police officer has been killed and burned in Maron, Mbombulot ward, Elgeyo Marakwet County, for allegedly rescuing some girls forced to undergo FGM. Speaking to TV47, the area county police commander Peter Mulinge has confirmed the incident, adding that a rifle has been stolen and that police are currently pursuing the suspects in a recovery mission. More details will be coming your way in a short while, even as we bring you an interview, a conversation with the Secretary for Youth Development in the Government of Kenya, that is Raymond Ochieng. I spoke to him earlier on. We shall be discussing deliberation post the Youth Connect Summit that just happened here in Nairobi. You want to stand by for that conversation with Raymond Ochieng. The power outage last night was due to a trip in the power network in the western region due to a lack of update in the network capacity from constrained finances. This is according to Energy and Petroleum Cabinet Secretary Davis Chirchir, who says by Thursday this week, a load-shedding schedule will be put in place for compromised regions to reduce strain on already overburdened networks, including the Kisumu-Muhoroni-Chemosit network. Is it a lack of network infrastructure updates, sectoral finance deficits, or plain negligence? Hibak Said tells us more.
As at 12:30 p.m. today, only 60% of power had been restored after a grueling 16+ hours of powerlessness across the country. This a repeat of a similar situation earlier this year, not once, but twice.
We had similar breakdowns, though the one of November was not as major, when we had a breakdown of some conductor at Olkaria 2. compared to the one of August when we lost the whole country.
Now, the installed generation capacity in the country, as at last year, stood a little over 3,000 megawatts, while the system peak demand within the same year was 2,057 megawatts. A healthy margin considering the budding state of industrialization in the country. So where did the power outage stem from?
Lack of investment in the network for a long time. And when I go through my statement, you'll appreciate that the fact that we've continued to connect customers on the last mile, we've continued to build industry, and we've not built the network in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And there is so much constraint in the transmission of electrons from wherever they're generated. And sometimes the network drips when it is overloaded.
An overload on the transmission network connecting Kisumu, Muhoroni to Chemosit, which the Cabinet Secretary says caused the trip that led to the countrywide outage, received the demand for an additional 200 megawatts, destabilizing power transmission for an entire country.
When there is no power, it impacts on the health institution, it impacts on every walks of life, and it is not something that anybody would pride of to have this kind of downtimes.
The Kenyan electricity grid, he says, is now operating suboptimally, a system that barely experienced nationwide disturbances a couple of years ago.
We'll have a more comprehensive way of balancing the country, so that even when we talk to load shedding, it shouldn't be an headline that Kenya is going to be load shedding. There are pockets to remove the constraints. Have I taken away your headline?
In the meantime, though, load shedding with a tentative schedule to be released this Thursday, with the most affected areas around the western region being first on the chopping block. Sharing is caring takes a different meaning now that the government is considering load shedding in order to reduce the overuse of some networks, especially in the western region. Hibak Said for TV47.
That the country will have a load shedding schedule. Energy CS Davis Churchill has disclosed that the government is considering implementing planned power outages, commonly referred to as load shedding. The initiative aims to protect the power transmission network from overloading. The CS was, however, quick to emphasize that this measure does not signal a shortage of power in the country. Instead, it is a proactive step to prevent strain on the infrastructure. So what exactly is load shedding? Here now is an explainer on that, and the reasons for load shedding have been given as insufficient power generation. Now, this is when the demand for electricity exceeds the available power generation capacity. Now, infrastructure overload happens, or rather is overloading of power transmission and distribution system. Equipment failures also cause power load shedding because of malfunctions or failures in power plants, transformers, or other components of the electrical grid. Now, how does the load shedding process go about? The assessment is the first, where the system operators assess the electricity demand and available generation capacity. The scheduling follows. Based on the assessment, a schedule is created to determine which areas will experience reduced power. Notifications then follow, where advance notifications are given to consumers about the scheduled power cuts. Now, controlled reduction happens. Power is intentionally and temporarily cut off in specific areas according to the schedule. The effects of load shedding are far and wide, where disruption of services, of course, is first on the list. The interruption of electricity-dependent services and activities are affected. Now, economic impact of this is that productivity losses for businesses and industries. Talk about inconvenience, of course, because of the discomfort for households due to lack of power for essential appliances. That, in a nutshell, is what load shedding is all about and has been announced by the government through the Energy CS, that is Davis Churchill, and it will start with several areas in the country. You now know what these will include. And of course, the government has explained whatever the CS Churchill has said, that the load shedding will be implemented in phases, and also it is basically planned power outages. We hope and we wait to see how that plays out. Away from matters load shedding, the National Transport and Safety Authority, that is NTSA, has urged stakeholders to support their new proposed rates, which have been increased in a bid to plug a budget deficit of more than 2.37 billion Kenya shillings. However, driving licenses renewal costs have not been altered but driving school licenses will increase to 5,000 shillings from 22,000 shillings, an increase of 150%.
To bridge the deficit accumulated, the National Transport and Safety Authority is now proposing a drastic increase in the cost of 45 services rendered. In the proposed charges, one will need to pay 5,000 Kenya shillings from 3,000 Kenya shillings to obtain a number plate from NTSA, while a speed limiter will now go for 150,000 from 50,000.
We've been operating a deficit budget for almost 5 years. Currently, our 2023-2024 budget stands at about 4.7 billion shillings, way below what we expected to do, because if you look at our statements of finance, most of the funds that don't come in, we are offering more than at a higher cost in terms of service than what we are able to collect from the services. Deficit has been almost between 500 million to 1 billion every year. Even currently it's actually 1 billion in terms of deficit. But we're looking at the long term. Our proposed financial improvement in terms of capacity is a long-term improvement, because the rates that we have not been reviewed for the last 10 years.
The regulator added that the hiked rates are as a result of tough economic times, and the increased rates will help with a 5% levy proposal, which will in the long term help to fund their operations. The authority now urging stakeholders to consider the draft proposal, as it will go a long way in trying to settle NTSA's deficits and also run its operations.
Our challenges have been growing: the number of roads, the number of stations for inspection purposes. We need to improve on our systems. We need to improve on capacity to manage the road traffic challenges. And that's why we need to increase our budget to be able to foot the necessary engagements as per our mandate. You know, the designs of the roads will affect our operations as an authority dealing with the regulations. So the 5% levy proposal is part of what we have projected in our feasibility study, that if we got that kind of money, we would be able, in the long term, 5 years and beyond, to operate without again another increase.
Motorists and Kenyans at large have also been asked to be careful while using the road during the festive season, as it is normally associated with road accidents, especially on the Nairobi-Nakuru highway. Natasha Wairimu, TV47.
Now, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua on Monday oversaw the official closing of a 4-day Youth Connect Africa Summit at the Kenyatta International Convention Center, KICC, Nairobi. The intense 6th summit that brought together 20,000 youth delegates from across the continent, coming up with recommendations, among them a borderless Africa, echoing louder than before. And as Moige William now reports, the Deputy President, in support of the recommendations, stating that the Kenyan government is championing for a free movement Africa.
After 3 days of extensive deliberations, exchange of ideas and discussions, Monday curtains came falling on the 6th edition of the Africa Youth Connect Summit, with Nairobi hosting Africa. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua gracing the closing ceremony, which was a build-up to this year's Jamhuri Day celebrations, the 60th Jamhuri Day edition, which is themed around empowerment of the youth.
We have ignited a flame of innovation, collaboration, and partnership, preparing our continent to a rebirth. It is a proud moment for Africa.
An ecstatic deputy president promising delegates representing the Kenyan youth drawn from all the 47 counties that the William Ruto administration is keen in implementing key resolutions deliberated during the summit in an aim to create more and equal opportunities for the youth, and in a deliberate move influence the region in adopting the same.
We'll work together in championing your dreams and propelling you to full potential for a prosperous Africa.
In attendance, some of the youth delegates applauded the organizers of the event in promoting Pan-Africanism, saying this was the most opportune time for the youngest continent in the world to speak in one voice for the benefit of its people and growth.
Nikirudi, mimi naona pia nitaanzisha kongamano kama hili, lakini hasa ya vijana wa kaskazini mashariki, ili tuweze tuzungumzie kwa undani mambo ambayo yanatukera sisi ikiwa katika mambo ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi.
Niko na bidhaa kadhaa nimetengeneza kama jams, kama wines. Now, since we are talking of borderless Africa, I'm looking forward to exporting to different African countries.
Delegates present at the summit acknowledged the conference will ensure Africa's integration through policy discussions and networking, with a focus on programs such as connecting the youth, continental marketplaces, and linking them to potential investors. Mwigi William, TV47.
Thank you, Mwige, for that report, which also sets the pace for the conversation I'm going to have with Raymond Ochieng. He is the Secretary for Youth Development in the government of Kenya, talking about what the Africa-free, or rather the border-free Kenya, a border-free continent, means, especially for young people like you. With the largest business and policy convener on youth development in Africa, Youth Connect Africa Summit came to a close in Nairobi on Monday, with young innovators taking home skills learned from different African backgrounds and hoping to create future opportunities for the youth. Our reporter Mike Kagwongo interacted with young innovators at the Hustler Bazaar in KICC Nairobi, both from within and beyond Africa, with creative innovations. Have a look.
For the last 4 days at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, delegates and policy makers have been engaging on youth leadership and innovation for Africa's integration through policy discussions. But as this was happening, young innovators from across Africa were also showcasing their creativity through entrepreneurship. This is Hustler Bazaar, a set-aside market with stalls occupied not only by Kenyans, but also by youth from Uganda, Guinea, Mozambique, Nigeria and other African countries who wanted to display their unique innovations to foreigners. Hamwe Kanae leads a group of Ugandan youth with different enterprises and a mission to create jobs rather than seeking jobs.
We can also share how we started, because also as we are job seekers, but as I can say, now we are job creators.
Hamwe says Western-based education only left Africans with the hope of being employed. However, the new curriculum employed now, including CBC, is giving hope to future youth who, oblivious to lack of employment, shall be employing others through their innovative ideas.
And we have been sharing how we overcame to these following innovative products and ideas.
Hydroponic farming, for instance, is the art of growing plants without the use of soil. Joel Musaki from Soweto in Kayole is among 21 members of Joyful Bird Self-Help Group doing this climatically friendly smart farming. Omusaki says this innovation increases farmer yields and helps even smallholder farmer to maximize on returns.
In our case, we do the hydroponic farming of barley. We don't use soil. So we came up with this idea because of, you can see the cost of feeds is high.
The technology is old as history and was used in famous hanging gardens of Babylon. For commercial purposes, like in the feeding of livestock, it started in 1960s in Australia and has spread to the rest of the world ever since. Ever seen a blended organic guava tea with cinnamon? Kedi Grace from Kenya is the founder of agro-processing company known as Kedi Botanic, dealing with herbal products.
It improves indigestion to those people who have bloating, acidity, flatulence, ulcers, it aids a lot.
She has already shared this unique idea with visitors who also committed to take it home. The summit propels significant investment in the development of opportunities for youth in Africa, as well as strong policy influence. Now, with the 6th edition of Youth Connect Africa Summit closing curtains here in Nairobi, these young innovators will have at least something new to take home and expound new knowledge that they ought to have learned from Nairobi to those that never got a chance to attend. Mike Kagwongo, TV47 from Hustler Bazaar at KICC, Nairobi.
Thank you, Mike, for that, and we indeed look forward to more innovations like this. Even as I promised you, shall be speaking to the Secretary Matters Youth Development a little bit later on to just unpack what this means, especially for the Kenyan youth as well as the African youth population. To some sad news here, and a family in Kabete, Kiambu County, is in mourning after their 2 children lost their lives in an inferno that also left 12 houses burnt. According to area chief, the 2 children, aged 2 and 4 years respectively, were in the house when the fire erupted. Residents of the area said their efforts to rescue the children proved futile as the firefighters arrived when the fire couldn't be contained. The cause of the fire is yet to be established.
Hii sababu watoto wako kwa maboma waangalie kabisa because niko na wao hapa na hata wacha hapa tu, hata kwingine tutaendelea na baraza, sababu hii time lazima mtu achuke watoto sana. Tunafikiria pengine kulikuwa na disconnect ya stima pahali, ndio pengine ikalipuka, sababu moto ilionekana tu ikitoka kwa hiyo boma, na watu wamesema hawageweza, zimamoto wamefika lakini hawageweza hawa watoto wameaga tu.
Tulikuja tukaanza kubomoa this side kwenye moto ilikuwa imeaccumulate hii ya kwanza tukaokoa. Kuna watoto wengine walikuwa kwa ile room nyingine juu ni ploti na watoto wanaishi hapa na wengine huko mwisho. Wale wengine tuliweza kuwa save wenye walikuwa ile mwisho, na tukaokoa hao wengine tukuweza. Moto ilikuwa imeaccumulate hiyo room yote. Hiyo moto then tukajaribu kuokoa vitu iko hatukuweza, moto ikawa.
May their souls rest in peace. In a few hours from now, specifically 2 hours and just about 39 minutes, Kenya shall mark 60 years of its independence. Those we spoke to in this next piece by Grace Korea Kanja tell us the moment in 1963 was very surreal, liberating, a moment that brought the nation so much pride and had many pregnant with expectations. Promises were made and finally there appeared to be light at the end of the tunnel. But were the promises kept, particularly on eliminating poverty in the country? Let's find out.
The late founding President Jomo Kenyatta promised 3 things. I know you know what I'm talking about, but here goes. To eliminate poverty, ignorance, if you like, ujinga, and to ensure the population has good health.
Because the Mzungu had emphasized those things as a way of controlling.
And so freedom had come, and it appeared promising.
You had all these people coming from detention camps, Manyani and so on, or coming from schools, and they expected what? Good life, good jobs. So there was Kenyatta wondering, what do I do now? So create a national what? Youth service.
Now that was then. More than 6 decades later, what does Prof make of Kenya right now in as far as our poverty level is concerned?
There is a lot of disappointment. Not that the country is poor, but that it has had poor leadership. Kenya is underdeveloping and poverty is increasing, deliberately done so. Now, there are different ways in which poverty is created. One, when you have currency devaluation, when you have policies that discourage people from being productive, taxes are ways of creating poverty. So things are bad at present, not the way they were in the 1960s.
Now, the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis, KIPRA, paints a somewhat different picture.
The figure we had in 2005/06 was 46.1% of the population were poor. But according to the statistics of 2015-2016, this had reduced significantly to 36.1%.
But listen, in its 2021 Kenya Poverty Report, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics said that the results of the analysis of the 2021 Kenya Continuous Household Survey data shows that the overall poverty headcount rate for individuals at the national level was at 38.6%. That is definitely an increase in the poverty level, though partly attributed to COVID-19 and the locust infestation.
The Human Development Index for Kenya at the moment is around 0.551 out of a maximum of 1, which means we are above average, but still room to cover exists. And this can be attained through ensuring that we have majority of the population, particularly the youth and the children, access schooling right from preschool, primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Now, despite this, there is always concern over one of the world's largest slums, which happens to be in Nairobi, Kibra.
The government is doing a lot to get people in the informal settlements out of poverty and other deprivations. And this is being achieved through access to education, access to healthcare systems, including support for community healthcare workers, access to housing.
Kibra is a large slum, and people like it that way. Slum lords, eh? And some slum lords are at the top, eh? They like it that way. Because it also supplies labor for political activities and such things. And others, there is a slum almost everywhere. And so the desire to eliminate slums may not be there.
Grace Kuriakanja, TV47.
And that a story by Grace Kuriakanja explaining the poverty issue facing the country leads us to a short break right here on the Daily Report. When we come back, there's still more on the other side, looking at what else Kenya at 60 potential. And we did ask you on social media, or rather tonight we asked you, what do you have to celebrate? Is there anything to celebrate with Kenya turning 60? 22047 is our SMS line. Start with your name, where you're watching us from, and your feedback on that. We also welcome you to use X, formerly Twitter, at TV47 News, at George Maringa _. Use the hashtag Daily Report. We're back in a few minutes to stay with us. 9:30 o'clock. We thank you for staying with us. We're watching Daily Report with me, George Maringa. Rhoda Nyamai is still on sign language interpretation. On the 23rd of November this year, Makueni County lost 8 people who were swept by waters of a swollen river, Muoni. 3 bodies were recovered, with the burial of 1 taking place on the 2nd of December. Moige William attended this sorrowful ceremony, but later set camp in the region, which is reported to have been greatly affected by floods, claiming the lives of close to 20 people. The situation painting a grim picture of the adverse effects of climate change the country is facing as the world convenes at the United Arab Emirates to discuss climate change with African nations, intensifying pushing for substantial climate finance from the world's biggest polluters.
On the 2nd of December, Esther Ndunge Mutwati, a mother of 8, was laid to rest at the slopes of Chemundo Hills in Biti Ward, Makueni County. The burial ceremony was marked by watery eyes, frowned faces, and a somber mood as the family struggled to come to terms with her untimely death.
Our God is going to be faithful to us and is going to carry us through in these trying moments.
The 60-year-old grandmother of 14 was part of a group of women who had traveled on the fateful day, the 23rd of November, to attend a meeting convened by First Lady Rachel Ruto in Kasarani, Nairobi. Little did our family know that she would not return home alive. A survivor of the tragic incident, Agnes Wanza shared her harrowing experience. She had traveled with Esther to Nairobi and narrowly escaped the fate that befell her friend. Wanza recounts the dreadful evening when the raging waters of River Muoni swept away 8 people, including Esther, as they attempted to cross the swollen river at around 10 p.m.
Hiyo siku ni Mungu. Ule kijana alinishika, nikamwambia mimi nitapelekwa, nitaenda, akanipuruta. Na mama mwingine hapo alitushika hivyo tukiwa wawili. Na pastor wa Lutheran. Tukashikana, tukarudi nyuma. Hivi na nyuma, tukasonga tukapika huko nje. Kutoka hapo maji kaanza kukua nyingi. Ikakuja ikapasua hii mlima mara ya kwanza, ikapasua mara ya pili, ikapasua mara ya 3. Na ya Mungu ni mengi, hakuna saa. Maji ikakuwa mingi, kakuja ikawateremsha huko na hiyo mlima ikawasika.
Bodies of 3 people have since been recovered, while 4 people are still missing as different agencies embark on a search mission to locate the missing persons. Makueni County, facing the brunt of El Nino rains, has reported over 20 deaths. Esther has been laid to rest. She adds to the list of the many Kenyans who have lost their lives due to the adverse effects of climate change that the country has been witnessing. Earlier on, it was drought, catastrophic. Now, it is floods, and the same is being experienced. Human life isn't the only issue at stake. Just a few kilometers south of Mutanda village, Samin Dunda lost his 2 acres of land to the destructive forces of the weather. This is what is left now. A rocky valley with a stream of water flowing downhill.
Hii sehemu kalikuwa kakitu kadogo tu, kamto kadogo kama njia. Na maji ilivyotoka huko juu, ikakata ikatengeneza mto. Juu inatoka huko juu hakuna kitu kinasimamisha hiyo maji. Inatoka huko kuteremka.
Local leaders have decried the adverse impact of climate change in Makueni County, citing a recent prolonged drought and the current onslaught of floods. According to Senator Dan Maanzo, the responsibility to mitigate the harsh effects of climate change rests with the country's top leadership.
There are a lot of funds which have been sourced for climate change. The funds must be applied through the counties. The moment these funds are applied through without a system, without a law, there must be a system. It must be a law. But with immediate effect, because we have county governments, these monies must go to all counties. There are counties which have suffered even more than Makueni. The coastal counties and the northeastern counties. Their leaders have talked, but the national government has not taken heed. In Makueni, we are saying this is the last time we should lose people. We want to see the El Nino money released to Makueni County government.
On a global stage in the United Arab Emirates, President William Ruto, in his address at the opening plenary of the COP28, emphasized on the urgent need for global cooperation to address the existential threat of climate change.
In this COP, finally, we are all agreed it is no longer about if, it is when we finally reform the international financial architecture so that it is fit for purpose, so that it serves the needs and the nuances of the current situation globally, especially in the global south.
Kenya, along with other African nations, sought significant climate finance from major polluters, considering its minimal contribution to the climate crisis and its substantial impact. The Horn of Africa, having recently grappled with devastating drought, is now contending with severe floods affecting countries like Kenya and Somalia. The region's vulnerability is symbolic of the urgent need for proactive and collective measures to address the multifaceted challenges posed by climate change. In February, South Africa faced the unprecedented and prolonged impact of Cyclone Freddy, marking the most extended tropical storm on record. This catastrophic event resulted in the tragic loss of over 1,000 lives, further highlighting the real and immediate consequences of environmental instability. Mwigi William, TV47.
Thank you, Moige, for that report, and we pray for the souls of those who have departed. May they rest in peace. Now, this is TV47 Sports News. Remember, you now have a chance to win amazing prizes like an all-expense-paid trip to Mombasa Beach Hotel, mbuzi, airtime, cooking oil, bus fare, and other prizes with Radio 47 and Alkibet. To participate, send the word Flight 47 to 24550. Let's get sporty now, shall we? The Kenya Under-15 girls select exhibited their prowess by securing impressive victories in a dynamic start to the CAF African Schools Football Championship Sakafa Qualifier Tournament, which kicked off today at Kasarani Stadium. Kenya Under-15 girls marked their dominance with a 2-0 win against Rwanda, courtesy of Faith Boke and Brenda Achieng. Later on, Wamboi Tabitha's lone goal sealed a 1-0 victory against Tanzania. Meanwhile, the Kenya Under-15 boys began the tournament with a 1-0 loss to Tanzania and later redeemed themselves with a 2-0 win against Somalia. This tournament features 6 teams, which include Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Burundi, engaging in a round-robin format. The schedule includes 4 matches for the Under-15 girls team and 6 matches for the Under-15 boys teams.
It's a good feeling to win against the champions, and TZ is a good team, so we had to look for a strategy to try and win the match, of which it was a build up and putting the ball down. Mentally, we had psyched the players that yes, this is a must win, and of course they did it. Of course, we had said 1 match at a time, and that is what we are doing, so we don't want to pressurize ourselves, but 1 match at a time. So for today it's done, so we are waiting for tomorrow.
Kweli nimepoteza mechi moja, nimepata draw mechi moja ya kwanza, lakini mechi za kesho nimejiandaa kushinda mechi zote ambazo tutakutana na Burundi pamoja na Rwanda, ili kuweza kusogea kupata points na kunisogeza mbele kidogo.
And all the best to the teams. Beef Researchers FC are the champions of the first edition of the Carlos Dewey Foundation Football Tournament held at the Poster Grounds, Nakuru. Beef FC were forced to come from behind to register the victory after trailing 2-0 inside 10 minutes before pulling a comeback to be crowned as the inaugural Carlos Dewey Tournament champions. Meanwhile, Lanet Boys defeated Umoja Lasers 2-1 in the third-place playoff.
Nasikia roho inapiga furaha tele. Furahia. Lakini ilikuwa lazima tushinde.
Unazungumziaje kuhusu mechi venye imekuwa?
Mechi imekuwa na mshike. Lakini best team imewin.
Itaona naweza sema itazangu hiali. Inaweza kusaidia vijana. Sasa unapata vijana hawezi ingia kwa madrugs, unaona? Kuna hivyo. Hiyo ni furaha sana. Kuinua kikombe ya kwanza na pili ni sherehe kubwa sana. Sema washughulikie kitu kama jezi, juu timu mingi hazina jezi. Baada kama kuna ile game ilianza hii ya Lanetu. Napata walikuwa na vaji tofauti, unaona na timu moja. Sasa hiyo story na jezi wangeofa kila timu jezi. Bora tumeparticipate, wapatiwe jezi.
This is TV47 Sports News. Remember, you now have a chance to win amazing prizes like an all-expense paid trip to Mombasa Beach Hotel. Imagine that. Mbuzi, airtime, cooking oil, bus fare and other prizes with Radio 47 and Okilbet. To participate, send the word Flight 47 to 24550. Forty-one minutes past the hour. We continue to invite your feedback at TV47 News at George Maringa _. Our SMS line 22047 is still open. What do you have to celebrate with Kenya at 60, and what perhaps would be your recommendations on the improvements that need to be made? Our SMS lines are open. I shall be sampling some of your feedback as the